Hey there, everyone. Evan Davies here. I run solutions, partnerships, and marketing at Coda. For those of you who've been following along the series, you'll know that our CEO and co-founder, Shishir Mehrotra, is the one who will normally be in the driver's seat. Well, in this special episode, I'm going to be turning the tables, so we're going to dig in a bit to his background and experience and see if we can't create an awesome doc. Let's get started. Are you live too?
We're rolling.
Cool.
Yeah, all right.
Shishir Mehrotra.
Before starting Coda, I used to work on YouTube at Google. There were a lot of things that were going well and not going so well, and a lot of it sort of traced back to how we ran our meetings. And I think it's true of a lot of companies that the way you run your meetings really changes how you run your whole culture. The main philosophy I've come to is that you should design your meeting like you would design your product. And it's also requires a similar set of mindsets. You have to think about the incentives, you have to think about the core structures, what are the game mechanics, when is supposed to be, who's supposed to be there, here's how we're going to collect feedback. That's sort of at a high level. Those things should be so set by the time you set your forum and you set your culture that you can then focus on the discussion of the content that the presenters are actually trying to get some feedback on.
I've also found it's particularly helpful to set those types of forums when you have a remote company. I mean, we have 3 offices. At Box, we started expanding very broadly into different markets, and as soon as we hit that expansion, that was the first thing that suffered, was the meeting culture where people weren't used to setting these really good team forums to communicate. Have you seen specific meetings like really feel well designed in Coda or elsewhere?
I mean, the one that's probably most iconic at Coda is this meeting we call Catalyst, which is I think closest to the topic we have today on review forums. And so we'll talk more about that forum, but the sort of core idea of a inclusive forum where everybody feels comfortable presenting an idea. For the most part, teams choose to do this. It's a way for them to unblock a decision or make sure certain teams are coordinated. But we use it for everything from early in a process. It'll be a brainstorm. How should we approach this topic? It might be something like right as we're about to close on a decision, where I just want to get everybody aligned. It's when designed well as a forum, I think it can be used for a pretty wide set of topics.
Cool. So we're going to talk about how to build out the Catalyst meeting format in a Coda doc.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with a fresh Coda doc, which I've just created, classically titled Untitled.
Yeah, give it a title.
So we'll call this is your Shishir's Practical Guide to Meetings.
Let's do review forums.
Review forums, let's say. So yeah, typically when we start this process, we want to put in a little bit more information in the welcome section that describes what we're trying to build here. Do you have any kind of background that's worth sharing?
Yeah, sounds good. So let's see. I prepped a couple things. So I'll give this thing a title. I think maybe I like to start these welcome sections with a principle that sort of hangs the whole thing together. Design your meetings like you design your product. And I think there are sort of 3 main elements of what we'll end up talking about here. So the first one is design your forum. We use this diamond shape to represent review forums because review forums tend to be things that are opening a topic and then closing a topic. And so it's sort of that conveys that. And it's a group of people who are collected around an idea. And it's like generally one topic that's going to own that forum. I think the second thing I was thinking we could talk about is design how the meeting itself runs. The last part I think we'll come back to is sort of design the communication loop. And this I think is sort of back to the analogy of designing your meetings like you design your product. You would never design a product without thinking about the rest of the mechanics of the communication loop. What notification gets sent, what does the onboarding feel like, how do you make sure everybody follows through on each piece of the meeting.
First thing we probably want to do is create a new section for the forum. And this will probably just be our list of ongoing topics, you think?
Yeah, sounds good.
We'll call it topics. And then I'm going to add a table. So this will be our all topics table. And this first column, which is the name of the row, will be topics. So once we've got our topics listed, we've got our date, duration, presenter. So this is going to be the role of the presenter, of which there will only be one in any given.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's probably three main roles. I'd say, for every topic, there's a presenter, there's a decision maker, and there's attendees.
Well, I can also invite some additional people in here. I'm going to get Laura, because I know she's going to be involved in the meetings that we have. And then by virtue of inviting her to this, now she'll show up as an option for these different items. We did a launch event called Block Party last year. We're going to actually use that as an example for a meeting we're going to run inside of this doc during our time together. So I'm going to be the presenter for this. We'll have Shishir be the decision maker.
Can you make a calendar view of this, or is that?
Yeah, we can show this as a calendar now, so I can basically see when these meetings are actually coming up, and I can add some to the calendar from directly here. So I'm going to move this back to a table view because there's a couple more things that I think we want to add before we move forward, right?
Yeah. Probably the two main ones are an area for the pre-read and then an area for the conclusion.
Got it. So now I have my topics. I've got my calendar here so people can at a glance see what's coming up soon. And so now I'm going to create the actual section.
All right, we're ready to phase two. We can talk a little bit about
your favorite book.
Yeah, so I got this book. Everybody knows it's my one of my favorites.
I was wondering when this would show up.
It's a handbook for running meetings, and they have this analogy they start with that I really like, and it's about these two kids who are playing ball. And one of the kids says, "Hey, I have an idea. How about we keep score?" And then the other kid says, okay, great, how about every time we do it, we take one step backwards and we see how long we can go. And all of a sudden, this thing that started as kind of mindless play has become a game. And the thesis in this book is that meetings have the same model, that most meetings just feel like play. We show up and we just screw around, and whatever happens, happens. And then sometimes they feel like a game. And games have certain characteristics. They have structure, and they have goals, and they have boundaries, and they have materials, like you can't play ball without a ball, and you can't run a post-it brainstorm without any post-its. So maybe we'll start with the question moderator. So this is one.
AKA Dory.
That's right. There's this pretty famous meeting at Google called TGIF, which is every Friday Larry and Sergey would get up and answer questions for the whole company, and anybody could submit a question, and then everybody else would vote them up and down, and they would answer the questions in order. It was named Dory because named after the fish who asked all the questions. And so the group is going to come to consensus on and sort of be involved in driving that discussion. So, part of the reason I really like doing Dory's in our docs is that all of a sudden it gets all your people involved. Your remote person, your wallflower. Everybody starts to feel like they have a chance to be part of this meeting. It means you get a lot more thoughtful questions because if you're forced to write it down, you often kind of get to the point. You figure out what you really want to know. It orders your discussion, so you feel like you're going through things in the most important order, and it's not whoever speaks the loudest is all of a sudden dominating all the questions of the meeting. And then finally, as you're leaving the meeting, you feel a sense of accomplishment because you're like, well, I just went through all the meetings that had at least 3 upvotes. And so you feel pretty good about, just left the meeting discussing the most important things.
We should probably talk about setting up an individual meeting. Let's take the launch event as an example.
Yeah, sounds great.
So I'm going to create a section here, and I'm just going to call this the launch event. We want to create probably a view off of that topics table since we already have documented a bunch of information about that meeting, including the attendees and presenters. Right. So instead of kind of typing all that stuff out here, we can just create a view of that topics table, and I'm going to filter it down to the launch event. And what I'm actually going to do, because I want to reuse this section over and over again, so I can use this almost as a template where I can duplicate it for each type of meeting. So I'm going to add actually a little control in here, which lets me select which meetings. And then I'm going to actually tie this to the all topics table. And then when I select this, I can now pick from the topics I have in my log. So now we've got a space where we can actually understand for this particular meeting what we're working on. So the next thing I might want is to set up all the pre-read material and kind of things we're going to be doing. So I'm going to start with a presentation. And what I'll do is I'll paste in a link. And now you'll see it gives me an option to either view it as a URL or just embed it directly in here.
Oh, that's cool.
So now I can go and actually scroll through this presentation live. I could do this with other types of formats as well. So our topic voter is now just in the doc, complete with my voting button and the number of votes. We have an ability to capture the basic information about the meeting, who's involved, the roles at play, any of the supporting details or presentations, and then our ability to make key decisions based on the sentiment of everyone who's involved.
Probably the one last thing we need is just an area to keep notes.
Oh yeah. We often forget the area for notes. If we just look at our topics table here, we've got the pre-read and we've got a conclusion. So there's probably one step which is reminding folks who are attending what the actual pre-read is that they need to care about, and then the conclusion gets sent out after the fact. So it might be two discrete communication loops.
Okay, sounds good.
And one of them is most commonly, I think, for us in Slack.
Okay.
We often, pre-reads will get sent in Slack, and those are things that we'll work through. And then the conclusion is best for longer form and email.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll integrate those. And what we'll do is we'll actually add the packs to this doc first. So with the packs set up here, I can go and install both Slack into this doc. And I'm going to do the same thing with Gmail, and that'll prompt me with the same information. And so we're going to use these to send a Slack message and send a Gmail message from a doc. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to hide some of these columns really quick just for some real estate, and I'm going to add a couple of columns. So I'm going to add first a button column which will be linked up to Slack, which will then post a message. And the content I can actually just link to a pre-read, or I can write something in here. So I can actually use the concatenate formula, which we often use to string different pieces of text together. So I'll just type equals here so that this is formulaic, concatenate, and then I'm going to say it's almost time for, and then I will add in actually some of the details from the column for this particular row. So I'll say it's almost time for the topic column, so topic A in this case. Please make sure you check the pre-read. And then I'm going to add the pre-read column. And now I'm going to load my Slack channel and wait for just a second. All right, and so if I go into Food Project, you'll see now it says it's almost time for launch event. Make sure you check the pre-read. And then the last thing we'll do is we'll create our send conclusion. And what this will be is a similar button where, in this case, I'm going to configure it to send an email. In this case, I could just send it to the attendees by setting equals attendees, which is that column, and then dot email, which will then give me a list of the emails the attendees for that particular topic.
Super cool.
Subject is, we'll do this formulaically again too with concatenate, and I'll just say topic and then conclusion. What this means for me now is if I go and I check my email, there it is, launch event conclusion. Woo! And the great thing about this is now we can pull this down for every single meeting, and everything we set up just now, we don't have to reset it up again. All we have to do is duplicate the section, add in the topics, and we're off to the races.
I really love that we do this in one document, because usually this would be all different, as a Google Doc per meeting or something like that, and you'd end up with this mess of you end up this folder full of these. Yeah, so it looks like so we designed our forum, and so we set up that this is what a topic means in our forum, and what's the date and time of the meeting, who are the different roles. But basically, designed the core of our forum, or in Coda terms, we designed the base table of this document.
Yeah, and the communication. If we set up automations in this too, we're basically we don't ever have to. I don't have to reformat another email.
Yeah.
Now
you can just focus on the actual content of your meetings rather than on the frame around them.
Perfect.